Boy, week 2 waiver wire, it is pretty good. It is pretty loaded. And honestly, it's pretty stressful. I'm freaking out a little bit internally about the waiver wire. I don't know if you guys feel that way, but especially in fab leagues, I am looking forward to the next hour of my life so you guys can help me sort it all out. There is a lot going on. Oh, and by the way, Aaron Rodgers is out for the season. Jamie, you have written the week 2 waiver wire column. How do you feel about it? You share any of my sentiment?
In a couple of leagues, I mean, obviously I had a lot invested in J.K. Dobbins, so I need to add a running back, and the two Ravens guys being available and trying to make sense of who's going to be the better of the two is a little struggle for me. But no, it's certainly, yeah, I could see where a lot of people are going to have some. Okay, do I go all in on Kieran Williams? Do I go all in on Puka Nacua? Do I go all in on Gus Edwards or Justice Hill? Those type of situations. Like Kenneth Gainwell to me is easy. That's the free space if he's available, because he's got the chance to be the lead running back for the Eagles, and that's a pretty cool thing to find on waivers. But in terms of, is Baltimore done? Is Melvin Gordon the answer? So like there's a lot of questions there. I wouldn't be surprised if someone's added. So yeah, there's some certain uncertainties, and then the tight end roulette game of, will you add the right one if that one is available?
How do you feel about waivers this week, Dave?
Morning, guys. I don't love a lot of the players on waivers this week. And so unless I'm like Jamie and I lost J.K. Dobbins in 75% of my leagues, I might let other people spend their fab on the running backs. I agree that Gainwell, it's a shrewd thing to say, because everyone's going to look at what Kyren Williams did and they're going to say, well, that's the guy to go after. He just had a bunch of snaps and touchdowns for the Rams. I don't think he's that good. And then they'll say, well, J.K. Dobbins is out. Somebody's got to get the work in Baltimore. Well, it might be 3 people getting the work, and we know that Lamar Jackson likes to run with the ball. So Gainwell, if you think back to what we said before the season started, and then you add in that he played over 60% of the snaps in week 1, he seems like the pretty obvious go-to guy at running back. He's available in 46% of leagues. Puka and nobody else on the list I'm nervous about. And so unless I really need a wide receiver or I really need a running back, I think I'm going to try and keep my fab bids cheap this week. It's a different story if you've got waivers and you've got the number 1 waiver claim and Gainwell's not out there. He's rostered already and you don't want to get Nacua. You really need a running back. You want to get Kyren Williams at that point, fine. But when it comes to the fab, I think unless you really need one of those 2 guys, Nacua or Gainwell, save it.
Yeah, I mean, Nacua is a 5th-round pick on a Rams team that we didn't expect to be very good. It just blasted the Seahawks, surprisingly. Now, the Seahawks gave up the 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers last year. Nacua's potentially best play was when he absolutely burned their best cornerback, Tariq Woolen, got wide open down the left sideline and was slightly overthrown. It should have been a touchdown. He would have had an even bigger day. The biggest question for me right now is, how is he legit? Because I just feel like he might be. I mean, I mentioned this if you didn't listen to the show yesterday, Beyond the Box Score. In May, we did an episode of Beyond the Box Score, and Jacob Gibbs couldn't stop raving about Puka Nacua. And I'm just thinking, okay, why are we talking about this guy? I mean, he's Cooper Kupp's on the team, and they're the Rams, and we don't expect that much from them, and he's a 5th-round pick and whatnot. And the advanced metrics were so good, targets per route run. And then he led the NFL in targets per route run. He and Tyreek Hill were tied in week 1 with a minimum of 25 routes. So I don't know. He might just be like a crazy steal. Dave, you have something to say about that? And I feel like there's no chance I could leave him unrostered. So it's really a fab question, because I know I want to put in a claim for him. But yeah, Dave.
So one of the things that I love looking for when I watch film of a player were there plays left on the field that could have resulted in even better numbers for somebody. And in the case of Nacua, there were 3 targets where his timing was off just a little bit with Matthew Stafford, including a deep ball from 35 yards out that would have been a touchdown. Just overthrown just a little bit for Puka Nacua. If they get that straightened out after a week or 2 of practice, he's going to impact this Rams offense for the rest of the year. And I know what you're worried about, Adam. Is he really that good? I think he's pretty good. I think he's good at getting open.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think he's got good size to go along with it. And the other thing that you're probably thinking is, well, what happens when Cooper Kupp comes back? Tell me when Cooper Kupp is coming back, and then tell me that he's going to be just fine for the rest of the season. You tell me those things, then maybe I'll think twice about spending some significant fab on Nakua. But I think Nakua is locked into a spot on the field, even when Cooper Kupp comes back. It's the exact type of receiver. He's like Robert Woods in that fact. He's a good route runner. He knows how to get open. He's got good hands. He's got good size. Occasionally has sneaky great speed. That was the case on that deep throw that he missed with Stafford. I think he's going to end up mattering quite a bit. You can add him now. At worst, he'll be a number 3 receiver.
All right. So if Puka Nacua is 7% rostered today, how rostered should he be by Thursday?
He'll probably be around 50% would be my guess. I don't know if he's going to be much higher than that because you got to remember 10-team leagues, how many people are going to add him. It's a matter of, again, who you're dropping. You know, I really struggled so far with, like, these are receivers you should be dropping. It's a little bit easier at the running back position because a couple of guys were healthy scratches, you know, Devon Achane, Rashad Penny, you know, if they want to drop those guys for Puka, I totally get that. But at the receiver spot, it's a little bit more of a struggle. Now, if you can, or you have some significant injury concerns, you know, and you need replacements at that spot, you know, you drafted Christian Watson and Jerry Jeudy or Cooper Kupp, you know, some of those scenarios where you might have a lot of wide receivers to replace, then you might prioritize him a little bit more. But I don't know if this is the week he jumps 80%. You know, that could be a 50% jump this week, and then he's in, you know, the 80s by next week if he has another big game.
He's got San Francisco this week, unfortunately. There's some tough matchups coming up for Nacua. He's got San Francisco at Cincinnati, at Indianapolis, Philadelphia. It's like a mix. But, okay, so would you drop the Chiefs wide receivers for Puka?
Yes.
If they were your worst wide receivers, yes.
To me, Sky Moore, yes. Kadarius, I'd have a hard time with, but probably so.
Okay. I think Adam Thielen is 70% rostered. He's a no-brainer. There are many guys, because he's only 7% rostered, so there are many guys that can be dropped for Puka Nacua. All right, we'll talk more about him a little bit later. I think we have to talk about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets here. Here's the big news that we'll be following throughout the week. Aaron Rodgers out for the season. I don't know if that's official, but Robert Saleh said Zach Wilson's going to be our starter for the rest of the season, so you can assume.
Sounds official.
Austin Eckler hurt his ankle, and we don't know. They've got Tennessee, which was one of the hardest matchups last year, was once again in week 1. So keep that in mind for Josh Kelly. But they got Tennessee coming up. J.K. Dobbins with the torn Achilles. Baltimore says they're staying in-house, which would mean Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and they'll elevate Melvin Gordon from the practice squad. Travis Kelce is getting better. However, Jay Glazer, I guess, reported about the amount of blood that they drained from his knee. And Pro Football Doc, Dr. Chow, said if that's how much blood they drained from his knee, Kelce's not playing in week 2. So keep that in mind. Don't consider him a lock to play in week 2 at Jacksonville. Aaron Jones grabbed his hamstring. He thinks he's fine, it seems. They're going to monitor it. We'll see about Aaron Jones. Christian Watson says he's a lot better chance to play in week 2. Kenneth Gainwell actually has injured ribs. We got to keep this in mind. They got a Thursday game, and if they had practiced on Monday, he would not have practiced. He has injured ribs. And
I think that's more just one of those Monday designations of not 100%, but not in danger of playing.
Well, I hope so. For his sake, I hope so, because they've got a fresh Rashad Penny. That could have been. This is just my conjecture. They could have rested Penny in week 1, knowing that they have a Thursday game, and then they could just make Penny active and quote unquote unleash him in week 2 against Minnesota.
Yeah,
but that would assume that they knew Gainwell was hurt before the game.
No, they could have assumed that they wanted a fresh running back for week 2.
Why would they not use him in week 1?
Because they figured that they didn't need to, because they wanted to save him because they have Kenneth Gainwell.
All right, that makes no sense, but okay.
Sure it does.
They're going to save their players, but just assume they're going to win?
For a Thursday game? Yes, it's a short week game. He's a running back who's prone to injuries. They'd rather have him for week 2 against Minnesota, which is easier. But again, this is in my head. This isn't what I heard or anything like that.
Okay.
For all I know, if Penny's inactive on Thursday, then you know to drop kick him off your roster.
And Pat Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson both left with injuries. If you have any Apple Podcast questions and you want them read on the mailbag, please send them in early this week, because I'm having trouble seeing them if they're not a few days early. So please, even now, if you can think ahead to start sit questions in Apple Podcast, they don't get read until Friday. So if you have any, Thursday questions, don't send those. But Apple Podcast questions, leave us a 5-star review with a question. Let's talk about the Aaron Rodgers news here and what it means for everyone on the Jets. By the way, hello, welcome back, Breece Hall. 83-yard run. he might have the longest run of the season of any running back. It was wow. But Jamie, what a downgrade to Zach Wilson. They were extremely run heavy last year with Zach Wilson. In the 8 games that he started and finished, he averaged, I think, about 199 yards per game. He had just under 200 yards per game, but only 28 pass attempts per game. Garrett Wilson scored fewer than 7 PPR fantasy points in 5 of those 8 games. He did catch an amazing touchdown last night. Give me your thoughts on the Jets offense right now.
Yeah, he played defense and then played offense in the
Yeah.
same play. It's look, Brees Hall looked great, so that's a huge positive for the Jets, for fantasy managers, and everybody involved with Brees Hall. So I hope he stays healthy, and if that's the case, you got maybe a steal if you got him in the 5th round or later. So let's just keep him upright. But for Garrett Wilson, it's a significant downgrade. I mean, I don't know if you can consider him a must-start receiver in a 2-receiver league this week against the Cowboys and how good that defense looked, knowing that Zach Wilson's going to be under duress and really looked, awful again last night. Now, he did look better in the preseason, which is encouraging. And I think being around Aaron Rodgers, being around the new system there with Nathaniel Hackett will help him improve on what he's looked like the first 2 years of his career. But that doesn't necessarily mean everything is fixed. And so I'm curious what the next move is going to be. Do they bring somebody in that they're familiar with? Joe Flacco, for example, again. Do they go out and maybe kick the tires on a Carson Wentz? Do they explore trade? There's a lot of scenarios here to bring in somebody else to help Zach Wilson. But as Robert Saleh said, he's the starter. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's the only guy in the quarterback room. So I'm curious to see what that next part of the story is going to be. But for now, it's a huge downgrade for Garrett Wilson. It's going to be very frustrating, I think, for him moving forward. I hope that's not the case, but that's just the way it feels.
Okay, so if you're drafting today, Garrett Wilson goes in what round?
4
at the earliest.
So
now I will say this: try and buy low, because we could be wrong. But the schedule is always going to be brutal, and the hope was he was going to thrive with better quarterback play. But if Zach Wilson just does one thing and one thing only, it's pepper that guy with targets, Garrett Wilson with targets, and hopefully he makes some of those crazy plays like he did last night. So if somebody is really panicked and you can get something good for him, if you could turn, I know this is crazy, but you could turn the Puka Nakuas of the world into, and something into Garrett Wilson, try and make that happen.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who had a big week 1 that was a mid-round pick or a late-round pick.
Michael Pittman.
Like you're not trading Calvin Ridley for Garrett Wilson at this point, but you're looking for, somebody that, Michael Pittman and something for
Zay
Garrett
Flowers.
Wilson.
Would you give up
Brandon
Zay Flowers
Ayuk,
and something?
Brandon Ayuk maybe for Garrett Wilson if you want to go that route.
Would you do that? Would you rather have Ayuk or Wilson?
I probably would still rather have Wilson.
I have Wilson higher on the trade chart.
Okay. Wilson yesterday, I want to say, I don't know if shadowed is the right word, but definitely saw a lot of Tre'Davious White, who did a nice job on him, and that's who he scored the touchdown.
But if Rodgers is there, that doesn't matter.
No, but it probably could have also partially explained his low production. It was 5 catches, 34 yards, and a touchdown on 5 targets.
Well, I think what explains his low production is probably Josh Allen vomiting all over himself, and the Jets realizing that if we just manage the game, we might be able to steal it, which they did.
Yeah, that was, boy. They really do a great job against Josh Allen. I'm guessing it's something like 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in his last 3 games against the Jets, going back to last year. All right.
It's crazy that he's 0-5 in his career in overtime.
So I usually ask you this at the top of the show, but I'll ask you now. Who are your top 3 waiver wire priorities for Fantasy Week 2?
Puka's first for me. I think that he's the best one to go after. Gainwell would be second if he's out there. And then I don't really have a third. If you want to just get somebody cheap who can sit on your bench and maybe eventually be a bye week replacement or a number 3 receiver in a PPR league, Jacoby Myers would be that guy. Kyron Williams, if you lost a running back, there's probably going to be more people out there that would take Kyron Williams ahead of Jacoby Myers. That would be my third guy. So let's call it Puka, Gainwell, Kyron Williams.
I'll go Gainwell, Puka, and Gus Edwards.
Okay. Just to throw this out there, Kyron Williams dominated snaps. I know Akers had a lot of carries, 22 carries.
He did.
this is 2/3 to 1/3 in terms of the snaps. Almost all the third downs were Kyren Williams. So in week 1, he was the lead running back. We've done this long enough where we get a lot of food news, and I can see that happen with the Eagles, right? I mean, let's throw that possibility out where DeAndre Swift has a bigger role. In fact, Nick Sirianni said about both Dallas Goedert and DeAndre Swift, we can't let that happen again, basically. Those guys have to get more touches. But, do you feel more secure with Kenneth Gainwell as the true lead running back or with Kyren Williams? It's hard to say he was the true lead running back when he had fewer carries. But what is my question here?
I would feel better about getting the Eagles running back than I would the Rams running back.
No, I understand that. No one's going to argue that. But which backfield do you feel like you have more clarity on, or is the answer neither?
Well, for one, we had an entire training camp. I don't want to say off season, but an entire training camp of every Eagles beat writer for the most part saying Gainwell's the guy, Gainwell's the guy, Gainwell's the guy. And then we get to week 1 and Gainwell's the guy. And Penny's inactive, and DeAndre Swift barely plays. And so we had Tom Spencer, who was covering this game as part of CBS's broadcast crew, saying that Nick Sirianni said it was DeAndre Swift's name that came out of his mouth the most. So I don't really know what to make of it, aside from everything we heard was what we saw.
I don't know, but I specifically remember at least 2 reporters saying they want DeAndre Swift to be the guy.
So the reports were just as messy as this backfield could end up being.
And actually seeing him be the guy.
No, I know. It's just I don't think all of the reports were saying Gainwell. I think there was kind of a disagreement in the in the beat. It's going to be, but it's Gainwell through week 1.
Can I remind everybody of the logic in taking Gainwell and why Gainwell was a good late round pick to begin with? Is he can do anything that the Eagles ask him to do. He's done it already. He was their best running back in the Super Bowl in terms of snaps played and usage, and even in the playoffs leading up to that. What do you know about DeAndre Swift? He gets hurt a lot. What do you know about Rashad Penny? He gets hurt even more than DeAndre Swift. So having that guy on your fantasy team seems like eventually he's going to come into play. And then in week 1, he played 62% of the snaps. Adam, you talked about this on 3rd and 4th downs. He played 7 of 14 snaps. Inside the 10, 2 of 4 snaps. That's a running back that you want to have on an Eagles team that I think they underwhelmed along the offensive line, but they should get better there. And the matchups will be easier there. And that starts on Thursday. And so forget about what I said about Penny. Like if the Eagles end up making him active, we'll see what he does. Gainwell's the one you obviously want to have on your team.
Yeah. I also know this about Gainwell. He has hardly any explosive plays in the regular season. I think his longest run was against the Giants in the postseason. It was something like 35 yards. DeAndre Swift has been one of the most explosive running backs in the NFL. He's a big play waiting to happen. So that's why I was leaning Swift. Everybody was
Swift, sure. And he was drafted ahead of Gainwell. Yeah.
So the other thing is, I'll say this about Gainwell. He had 4 catches yesterday. That's more than Miles Sanders had in any game last year.
Mm-hmm.
So good for Gainwell. All right.
That was really good for Swift if that eventually becomes what his opportunity is.
I just want to be clear. I'm not disputing that Gainwell should be picked up. I mean, it could definitely be. It's either him or Nakua, as you guys said, as number 1. Dave has Nakua 1, Gainwell to Jamie. Just got to throw that possibility out there that on Thursday, the Eagles backfield, even if Gainwell plays, could be different,
Yes. And that's the thing that we heard a lot about from Eagles beat reporters over the summer and into the preseason was that they're going to mix and match these running backs from game to game. So I can't guarantee that Gainwell is going to play 62% of the snaps every week. I'm just thinking that he's got the best shot to last the season and have a decent role in every game.
This show, I think we have to spend a lot of time talking about who to drop. It's easy to say we should add these players, but who should we drop? So stay tuned. We have a lot to get to today, including we'll do the top 3 at each position. We'll give you kind of a snapshot of the waiver wire. Then later in the show, we'll go deeper. There's one more name I want to throw out because the threshold that Jamie uses for this column, waiver wire, is 65%. He's not going to highlight the guys who are rostered in more than 65% of leagues. We consider those shallow leagues. However, on other websites, ESPN and Yahoo in particular, I think you do see a lot more 10-team leagues. So those guys that might be 70% rostered in our leagues, or a guy like Nico Collins, who's I think 78% rostered, might be widely available if you're not playing on CBS. So there's one more name I want to throw out, and that's Romeo Doubs. And he is 67% rostered, so he just missed the cut. And it's very realistic that he could be out there in all of these, in a lot of our listeners' leagues where they're looking at now Gainwell, Romeo Doubs, and Nakua. And if that's the case, guys, who's the top priority?
Dobbs.
Yes.
Okay. Get Romeo Doubs, 67. I can't believe he's only 67% rostered.
I can't believe Nico's only 72. I mean, there's a lot of
Amazing.
surprising, names. I can't believe Jacoby Myers is only 65%.
Yeah, but people
that one I
aren't going to be crazy to start Jacoby Myers. I don't know if they'll be crazy to start Nico either, but Dobbs is one that people might eventually say, "Oh yeah, that's a must-start guy."
I wonder if how much of the hamstring injury going into week 1, when so many drafts happen Labor Day weekend and those first few days before the Thursday night opener, that they were like, "Oh, I can't draft him now."
Dobbs, yep. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk fab. We'll give you a snapshot of the top 3 at each position, and we'll do some more news and notes, recap the Jets-Bills game. It was a interesting day for James Cook, I'd say. And yeah, blah, blah, blah. We'll get to that. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Okay, let's get back to it here. How much fab? We got all of our budget left. So what percentage are we using on Kenneth Gainwell?
If you lost a running back or you lost a player, don't have a player that's going to help you this week, so you're concerned about Eckler or Aaron Jones, I would say probably up to 15%.
Oh, you're not getting them.
Oh, I think you might.
With 15% for the Eagles starting running back, that's, I bet in our podcast league, well, that's 14 teams. So in that league, he's going to go for more.
I do appreciate Thomas dropping him right before the start of the season in our magazine league.
Put those claims in. I'm 0-1.
So, don't you think there's going to be more hype around the guys who scored and the guys who are now going to play in Baltimore? So Kyron Williams, I think, is going to get a lot of attention. I think people are going to overbid for him.
You think that Gainwell will not be the most expensive running back?
Well, here's the thing. Again,
so.
He's rostered fairly highly by comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So in the leagues where he's available, he'll probably go for more than Williams or one of the Ravens guys or any of the receivers. But in terms of who's going to command more fab, probably in most leagues is going to be Kyron Williams, just because he's more widely available.
Okay. So 15% for Gainwell. How much for Nakua?
10.
What'd you say?
10.
Yeah, you won't get him for 10.
But again, you're talking about a guy that's 7% rostered, and the majority of people are going to look at it and say Cooper Kupp could come back in week 5. And then what does that look like?
I think you get him at 20%. So
you definitely get him at 20%.
Yeah. So if you need a wide receiver that bad, a lot of wide receivers are hurt right now.
And then you're going to waste that money if he does a stinky game against the 49ers. You're going to be really pissed.
Okay. But if he actually has a decent game against the 49ers because his quarterback is good and they're not going to be able to run against the 49ers, keep that point in mind with Kyron Williams, then you're going to be thrilled to have spent 20%. Spend 17%. If you think he's going to go for more than 10%. You're going to need to spend more than 10. It's the first fab week of the year. Everybody's hot to trot to spend their fab. It's one of the reasons why I'm telling you, try and save it if you can, because there's going to be some wild bids.
On the other hand,
now you're saying save it, but also spend it on him.
Yeah, because if you need a wide receiver, spend 17%. He's the best receiver out there, Jamie. You said it yourself.
I don't think. Look, if you believe in him, and it's week 2, you could have him for the entire season. If you believe in Puka Nacua, 17% of your budget is absolutely reasonable. Now, if you guys think that's too much, that's fine. But if you're someone who believes in it, and by the way, Matthew Stafford was awesome. He was the second highest graded quarterback in PFF, which I suspected would be the case. Nobody was going to be better than Tua. He was barely pressured, which was one of the reasons he was awesome. But he looked great, and he hasn't really been healthy in so long. He was dealing with the injury in the preseason, in the training camp last year, and then he obviously got hurt during the season. He's healthy right now, and he played great. So, if you believe in, do you think this is reasonable? If you believe in Puka Nacua and you can get him for the entire season, then spending 20% of your budget is perfectly reasonable. And by the way, if he stinks against San Francisco, do not drop him. You should give everyone a leash when they're playing San Francisco. And you think that's fair to say that 20% is okay if you're a believer?
If you believe in him that he's going to be a weekly starter for you, then absolutely.
I mean, if he's a weekly starter, let's just say there is a weekly starter on waivers, you should spend 50% of your fab on a weekly starter, or you should be willing to do it. You don't have to with Nakua. But a
Sure.
guy that you can start every week, if he's on waivers and you get him for the rest of the season in week 2, that's a 50% type of player.
If
Sure,
that's
but
what you believe, sure.
yeah, but that's crazy.
I don't believe that
I
about
don't think
Nakua.
there's anybody that's worth even 25% that's out there on the waiver wire. And I'm scared that people are going to go and bid that much on everybody that we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it might have.
I mean, that's the other side of it too. If you don't really need Puka Nakua, then just don't bid, or don't bid a lot. Bid the 10%. If you get him, awesome. If not, you shouldn't be that heartbroken over it. But I think he's going to be pretty good.
I already got a trade offer in one dynasty league for him.
What is it?
I won't say who sent it to me, but it was a 3rd round rookie pick for Puka Nakua.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, you can tell him to kick rocks.
It wasn't me, everybody, just so you know.
No, it was not. It was not the Big Burger dynasty league.
What was I gonna say? Yeah, no, I just think it's interesting that the talent we have, the possibilities we have on the waiver wire this week. It's tough when it's week 2 and we have really nothing to compare it to. But it's much better than week 2 last year. We were going through that before the show.
Well, no, but there were 2 receivers who stood out, looking back at the list, which were Jahan Dotson and Christian Watson. And the similarities are rookies on a team that, needed targets. And Christian Watson, we know, took some time. It wasn't that much time, by week 4, I think it was, when he started to, pick things up. Dotson, we know, was very touchdown dependent early in the season, but clearly when he was on the field, he was fantastic. So you could get some situations where Puka's gonna have some big weeks, and you could get some situations where he might disappear. Just the concern would be is if he has a bad week 2, he might have a good week 3, might have another stinker week 3. Week 4, who knows? By week 5, he might not be the guy getting the targets. That's the thing you have to just understand.
Yeah.
I agree with Dave. We don't know when Cooper Kupp's coming back, but that's the timetable right now, is potentially week 5. And if that happens, is Matthew Stafford going to support 2 wide receivers in this offense? He's done it before. At 35 years old with that offensive line, can he do it again? I just don't know if Seattle's any good.
Slim says, doesn't your fab depend on the tendencies of your league? Some will spend all, some won't. Know your league.
100%.
And I agree.
Of
and
course.
From my perspective, I'm probably going a little aggressive here because my leagues are pretty much all 3 receiver leagues. One of my fab leagues is 14 teams. If you're in a 12-team, 2 receiver league, then you don't need to spend 20% of your fab on Puka Nakua.
No.
All right.
Yeah, and honestly, you shouldn't spend 20% unless you need a wide receiver.
How much for Gainwell? Did I ask you that?
Did
I ask you how much for Gainwell? Or just
I think you
Nakua?
did.
Gainwell, yes, I'd be closer to 20% for him.
Okay, how much for?
I think you said 15%, and Adam, you said, "Oh, there's no way he's going to go for that much," and I think he might, just because I think the other running backs are going to command a lot, if not more.
15 to 20%, I think, is
for that.
appropriate.
I'm sorry. I think I got a little bit too in my own league there, in my own world, because
You
again,
tarsted it.
a little bit. Yeah, my leagues are, I think, are a little bit deeper. The waiver wire is a little bit shallower just because there's so many 3 receiver leagues and 14 team whatnot. But yeah, I think like a regular 12 team, two running back, 2 receiver, 1 flex league. Yeah, probably was a little bit too aggressive with my fab calls. But it just takes one person in every league to spend crazy amount on a player. That happens all the time. Just to
give you an example, on 2 rookie wide receivers, so Dave and I play in a dynasty league where both following the rookie draft, Puka and Trey Palmer were available. And I think Palmer went for just a ridiculous amount. It was to a Bucs fan, so take that into account. But he was the most added, most fab was spent on him. And I think I got Puka for like $200 of $1,000 budget. Now, again, this is a 14-team dynasty league where the waiver wire is just brutally thin. Like, for example, I spent, I think it was like $500, 500 units, whatever you want to say, on Isaiah Pacheco last season at the same time. First time waivers ran, I needed running back help. He was, to me, worth the buy. The year before, I did the same thing for, God, I don't remember the Saints receiver, who flashed in the preseason.
Oh, I was just thinking Marquez Callaway.
It wasn't Marquez Callaway. It was
It wasn't.
I think it might have been Marquez Callaway.
was it Marquez Callaway?
I remember taking him over Brandon Cooks that year.
There was some, just complete overspend. But I did the same thing with Puka in terms of, for 200, I thought that was appropriate. And so, it all depends on, like you said, you got to know your league. You got to know what's available. 14-team league, you might want to spend 50% on him because there may not be anybody else coming down later in the season that's as potentially good. In a 10-team league, 5% might get it done.
Right. Okay, guys. Sorry. So let's go just real quick. Give me a fab percentage on Kyron Williams.
10.
I wouldn't go any higher than like 12 or 13 unless I was just even that feels high. I feel gross saying that much.
Okay, Gus Edwards.
10.
Yeah, at most.
Justice Hill.
5 to 10.
I'm not excited about these guys, Adam. So I'm good with that amount.
Let's get some more names floating out there. Who are the top 3 at each position? Jamie, you can start with quarterback.
Well, quarterback's not exactly the most exciting one, but you have, I think, Jordan Love, because if he was able to look like that, I know it wasn't in terms of most efficient, but still productive without Christian Watson. He's my favorite. Brock Purdy second. But again, both these guys are rostered in more than 50% of leagues. And I'm still going to go back to Sam Howell, only 39%. But again, not the most exciting group when you have, Mac Jones, first 30-point game ever. Is that something that's sustainable? Probably not. Baker Mayfield looked decent, but is that sustainable? Probably not. So I'll lean on, a couple of guys that I thought were going to be good in terms of Howell and Love, and then go with Brock Purdy, who I needed to see it, and he looked very good.
They're already going to be rostered in Superflex and 2 QB leagues. And so the whole point of adding them in 1 QB leagues is let's see what happens.
Right.
Let's see if these guys can break out and then either be bye week quarterbacks or guys that you can trade when another quarterback gets hurt, something like that. So you shouldn't spend a lot of fab for them, and they shouldn't be close to the top of your waiver claims either.
Right. I was surprised, and this is probably just the amount of people who play in Superflex and 2 QB leagues still. But Mac Jones is only rostered in 16% of our leagues, and Baker Mayfield 23%. So there might be some 10-team Superflex or 2 QB leagues where they're out there. So just make sure you roster those guys just in case. I mean, as we just saw, Aaron Rodgers just lost for the season, so it could end up being trade bait.
Oh, well, I have Mayfield. He's my 4th quarterback in our Superflex league, and I will be calling up the Aaron Rodgers manager today.
There you go.
They got Chicago this week. He could actually do well. One thing about Howell in a 1 QB league, if you're interested, his next 3 games are Denver, Buffalo, and Philadelphia. That is not what you like to see.
No, but again, it's more about, as Dave alluded to, you're not picking these guys up to be starters. You're picking them up to see what they can do if you need them when we get to the bye weeks and we talk about injuries and things that become problematic. So for right now, you have a roster spot to play with for a 0 bid, a $1 bid, depending on how your leagues go. Get ahead of it.
Yeah. All right. Running backs, Dave. Who are the top 3 running backs? Probably have covered this.
We've already covered Gainwell as 1. I think Kyron Williams, just based on volume, is number 2. I've got Gus 3. Justice Hill after that, Zach Moss after that, and then Josh Kelly's an interesting one. He's available in 82% of leagues. We don't know if Austin Eckler is going to play in week number 2, and so that could open the door for Kelly to see quite a lot of work in a tough matchup against Tennessee. I think if you've got Eckler, you should, and you don't like your running back depth, that's probably who your priority is.
I'd also look at Kendre Miller just because Jamal Williams did a lot of Jamal Williams things. I know it was against the Titans, but that could be a situation for the next 2 weeks if he's healthy, that maybe he has an opportunity if he does get a chance to get on the field.
And you can get him for nothing.
Let's talk a little bit about Zach Moss and Josh Kelly. If I told you that Eckler were out this week, where would you rank Josh Kelly? And first of all, I think it's pretty clear that we've got a high-end handcuff situation here anyway, so not a bad idea to get him. But if Eckler were out this week against the Titans, where would you rank Kelly?
Right
At
around
least
20.
as a top 24 running back.
Okay. He probably would be, I'm guessing, the highest ranked of all of these guys, Gainwell,
yes,
just for this week. Moss is interesting because last year at the end of the season, he had 4 straight games with pretty big work. Deion Jackson was terrible in week 1.
Yeah.
So I don't know that Moss is coming back in week 2, but what do you guys think? Is it kind of a sneaky ad here? What are we thinking? His next 3 games are Houston, which is amazing, Baltimore, which is terrible, and then the Rams, which we're not sure yet. But Moss, 24% rostered, Zach Moss.
He would still be below Gainwell, below the Ravens guys, below Kieran Williams, and below Josh Kelly for me. So I think you're just talking about with the chance of maybe getting one game out of Zach Moss, 1%.
Yeah, but that's all it should take. Maybe like 2% if you wanted to just beat the guy that's going to go 1% for Zach Moss. Remember, there's still a chance Jonathan Taylor's back in 3 weeks.
Still a
I'd say
chance he's
that
traded
chance
too.
is going up. What's that?
There's still a chance he's traded too.
It is. And so I don't mind having Moss on my bench. Like that's a good guy to target if you're just looking for running back bench depth without having to spend a lot of fab.
Jamie, who are the top 3 wide receivers? We said if Romeo Doubs is available, he's number 1. But who's the top 3 after that?
I moved Jacoby Myers and Juwan Johnson just with the notes I sent you to the shallow leagues part. So Puka would be 1, Zay Jones would be 2, and Josh Reynolds would be 3.
Oh, Zay Jones. Interesting.
Mm.
And
Again,
Reynolds.
you're just attaching yourself to a good quarterback right now, and he's somebody that still gonna be a playmaker for them.
You think that'll be consistent?
No, but again, look at the guys who are available that we tend to talk about. Is Darnell Mooney going to be consistent? Is Josh Reynolds going to be consistent? Is Raji Rice going to be consistent? Like there's a lot of uncertainty there. So when in doubt, find the quarterback, and the quarterback looked awesome.
Okay. If that touchdown catch to Zay Jones, the whole thing, the throw and the catch were really cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Reynolds. I mean, Reynolds, the Thursday guys, it feels like it was a month ago, but he had 80 yards, led the team in receiving.
Let's see. Who does he play next? He's got Seattle, then Atlanta, at Green Bay, and then Carolina. That's a pretty decent, that's a good stretch for Reynolds.
Yep.
And we don't know what the deal is with Myers. I would have Myers ahead of Reynolds if we knew Myers was going to be okay.
Myers would be second for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Myers in the concussion protocol had a huge game. Fun stat about the Falcons. I think it is now one of the last 11 quarterbacks who have faced the Falcons have scored more than 18 fantasy points in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. All right, tight ends. Dave, who are the top 3 tight ends to get?
I was waiting to get to this position. Hayden Hurst is number 1 for me. Jake Ferguson is number 2. In shallow leagues, Laporta and Kmet might be out there, but in most leagues they won't be. Zach Ertz and Luke Musgrave are like tied for 3rd. And that's format dependent. If it's non-PPR, there is no Ertz. It's all Luke Musgrave.
Okay. Jamie, Dave goes Hayden Hurst, Jake Ferguson, Ertz, and Musgrave. Any other names, or you like that list?
Yeah, just different order. I'd go Ferguson first. I think if they were in a more competitive game, we would have seen better production from Ferguson. And the fact that Hendershot dropped an easy touchdown probably may cost him whatever snaps he was getting as well. So Ferguson for me, then Hurst, then Musgrave, then Ertz. But you can look at
that. I'm sorry, Jamie. Go ahead.
You can look at Hunter Henry too.
If you're looking for a tight end long term, Ferguson should be first on the list. If you need a tight end just for now, Hurst is that guy.
Yeah, Ferguson gets the Jets in week 2, but he had all of the red zone targets for the Cowboys, all 4 of them. And he did have 7 targets. He didn't look very good, though. He had 2 drops. But as I mentioned yesterday on Beyond the Box Score, really good role for Jake Ferguson.
Mm-hmm.
The DSTs. Are the Cowboys available? And are the Cowboys going to score more fantasy points in week 2 against the Jets than they did in week 1? Which we found out last night on the live stream was not the highest scoring DST performance ever. That was, I think, the Browns in 1989. But it was sensational week winning performance for the Cowboys DST. Jamie, who are the DSTs to add?
I'd go with the Browns first. They look great, and I think that will continue against Pittsburgh, which looked awful. The Giants, just because they get the Cardinals. Packers, I think they look pretty good, and we'll see how the Falcons offense, how they show up. And then the Lions. I might take the Lions over the Packers if I had to make a choice, just because the 2 tackles for the Seahawks are a little bit banged up right now. But those 4 for me.
What's the Lions rostership?
18%.
Not bad. Did you have the Giants on your list?
I did.
Second.
Okay.
Yeah. He went
I like them.
Packers.
But I think the Browns do give you more rest of season appeal.
That pass rush was nasty.
Their secondary's deep. So that's a DST that you could grab and then not have to worry, theoretically, not have to worry about the rest of the year.
So the Packers, just Quay Walker, starting linebacker for them in the concussion protocol. So you can think about that. They have the Falcons this week. The Falcons actually are not a good match. They weren't last year either. Not a good matchup because they never throw. So you don't get sacks and you don't get interceptions. So I just want to throw that out there. They weren't a good matchup last year, and I don't know that they will be this year because they're just so stinking boring. They're not good for anyone.
The running backs. They're good for the running back.
They're great for Tyler Algier. Congratulations. If Tyler Algier and Kenneth Gainwell were on your waiver wire, who would you prioritize?
Gainwell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Some other news items here. Steelers had a terrible week with injuries. In addition to Johnson and Freiermuth, Cam Hayward's out several weeks, and their right tackle left, and he's in the concussion protocol. I mentioned on yesterday's show, but Anthony Richardson said he actually hurt himself in the first quarter when he hit his knee on the turf, so he played through that till the very end. Greg
he was
Dulcich,
limping around a little bit right after that.
He and especially Josh Allen need to stop taking so many hits. Josh Allen was
He's going to take a lot of hits.
a psycho last night. Greg Dulcich left with a leg injury.
What did you think about Richardson? I didn't talk to you about it.
I was impressed, but I went and I watched the film tape. I always forget what it is now. Tape. Very conservative. It was really interesting. You know, he didn't throw downfield at all, but he was really decisive. Got the ball out of his hands super quick, and a big contrast to CJ Stroud. I saw every time he was under pressure, he was running for his life, trying to make something happen. Richardson was just like, nope, I'm getting them, distributing the ball. It was cool. It's good for him. And Justin Fields needs to do more of that. You know, I think for a guy making his first start to be that comfortable was very impressive.
Justin Fields needs to throw downfield a little bit more.
Also true.
That was his problem. He had 4
news?
throws of 11 plus air yards.
No, Jamie, I don't want bad news. Okay, shove it. What is it?
Deontay Johnson's out a few weeks, according to Schefter.
Just a few weeks?
Just a few weeks sucks.
That's good news because it looked like he was grabbing a torn hamstring.
Let me tell you, man. Podcast league draft. Jamie took 3 players from me that I was so mad about. Deontay Johnson, Joe Burrow, and Kyle Pitts. We played in week 1, and I'm happy to report I am 1-0. JC Horn for the Panthers. He left in the second quarter. He's always hurt. Let's talk about the offensive line stuff because Garrett Bradbury, Minnesota center, he left in the second quarter. But the big ones are the Browns right tackle, Jack Conklin, out for the season. That stinks. Both of those tackles it looks like those tackles for the Seahawks are week to week. So is that who's week to week, or was it a different team that had 2? It was the Ravens guys are week to week. So the Ravens and the Seahawks both lost 2 starting offensive linemen. Ravens guys are week to week. And I think the Seahawks guys might be too, because they're looking into Jason Peters, who's 40 years old or something. And then Andrew Thomas, Giants left tackle. He's getting an MRI on his hamstring. He hurt it on the block kick. So those are major injuries that could have an impact. When we come back,
who's Andrew Thomas again?
We'll talk about the Jets and Bills, and we will do more waiver wire and also tell you who to drop. So I know it's been a long show, but stick around. We have a lot more important information to get to after this. Jets and Bills. Jets 22, Bills 16. Let's not spend too much time on this, guys, but you have any major takeaways, Dave, from this game?
I thought that Josh Allen got a little too aggressive, and 4 turnovers absolutely stinks. There's nothing to worry about with him. Stay the course with him. Diggs is amazing. Diggs and Allen, that connection, it's the whole reason why they were able to kick a field goal late as it was. I know people are going to be worried about Gabe Davis. I do think the shorter interception that Allen had is on Davis for rounding the route instead of making a sharper cut. I think he'll still be a boom bust number 3 type of fantasy wide receiver. I don't like how they used Kincaid. I like the usage of James Cook. I just thought that he'd be a little bit more explosive with it. And then I got some thoughts on the Jets that might surprise you, or at least one thought.
Well, how do you feel about Breece Hall going forward? I mean, that's the biggest question here.
I love Breece. I love the comeback story. You know that I was drafting him earlier than I should have been for a while. I hate to say this. He looks a full step slower than he did last year. I think a lot of the plays, the big plays that he had, were because Buffalo was out of position and he beat 8 in the box, stuff like that. He's got great vision.
And 83 yards.
I know. And he got caught from behind on it. And he
83 yards downfield.
Adam, do yourself a favor. Watch that play and then watch him last year.
Well, all right. I mean,
Last
look,
year he had a better knee.
It's clear that the knee
What are
is
you
still an
doing?
issue for him. I felt like he got real fortunate on those
Yeah,
plays.
he ran out of gas. He wasn't slow.
He was slow. He was slower than he was last year. He
I mean,
was.
it's possible. It's possible, Dave, but you're talking about week 1 and comparing him to last year. You know, he was amazing last year.
Well, what do you think I'm telling you, to cut Breece Hall or to trade him for
No,
whatever? you can get?
so instead of
course
this, why
not.
don't we just talk about
I'm just saying he
what do you
didn't
think
look
about
like
him?
Breece Hall from last year.
well, what do you think about him from a fantasy standpoint? Give me where do you rank him rest of season?
Oh, he's a top 15 type of fantasy running back rest of season. But if someone's going to come to me and unload for Breece Hall, I'm probably going to trade him. But it's got to be like, I have to get a haul for Breece Hall. I'm not giving him away. I'm not saying he's a sell high at all. I'm just saying he didn't look so good. And there's going to be games where he's going to play 30 to 40% of the snaps like it was here. And he's not going to break these long runs.
So do you
This
think,
might go down as his best game in the first half of the year.
do you think, Jamie, that Breece Hall is a top 15 running back?
No, not there yet, but this is extremely encouraging. I don't think he looks slow. I think he just ran out of gas after running that far when he did a lot of the work. But I do agree with Dave. I think that you can certainly try and trade him because Dalvin Cook's still going to be a problem, and now you have a bad quarterback on top of it. So still a tough schedule, but this is very, very encouraging, extremely encouraging to see him do this at this point.
Yeah.
Love it.
Even his first carry, I think, was a pretty damn good carry. I'm watching.
was.
He got tripped up right around the line of scrimmage.
Mhm.
Then he had to put a juke on the defensive back.
Yep.
So I think you might be being a little bit too harsh on him.
I'm just saying the speed is not there.
All right.
It's just not. I've got him right now as my 13th running back, tied for 13th on the trade chart as we sit here now. So yeah, top 15 running back. If you've got him, I don't know if you feel great starting him in week 2. It has nothing to do with the matchup. It has everything to do with just how many plays is he going to have.
Yeah, sure. All right, the drop-o-meter here. Let's go to the drop-o-meter. Adam Thielen.
11.
10, yeah. Kyle Pitts.
0.
0.
Jerick McKinnon. 72% rostered.
He's droppable, but he's going to matter in the second half of the season. So I'm going to give it a 5.
10 in non-PPR and 6 in PPR.
All right. You can double back for him later if you drop him.
Sky Moore, 90% rostered.
1.
7.
Wow. Big difference there. I'm surprised to hear the 1, Dave. I mean, Sky Moore, just because, we do have some pretty interesting players on the waiver wire this week. But you want to hold on?
Not
Who's
really.
this?
Sky Moore. Jamie
Yeah,
said
I want to
he's
keep him on the bench.
Kadarius Toney.
Same as
1.
Sky.
Okay.
The only difference is Sky will play more.
Kenny Pickett.
10.
0 in a 2 QB league, 10 in a 1 QB league.
Yeah. No, you don't drop starting quarterbacks in 2 QB leagues unless you're me. In a 10-team league, and you dropped Justin Fields for Andy Dalton last year. Marquise Brown, 93% rostered.
Oh, I think that depends on the size of your league. If you're in an 8-team league, he's like an 8. Once you get to 10, 12, 14 teams, he's like a 2.
2 at best.
Okay, so one is don't drop, 10 is drop immediately. So you're saying Marquise Brown is a don't drop. He's a 2.
Yeah, unless you're in like a super shallow league where there's all kinds of good players on the waiver wire.
Would you drop Dobbs? Would you drop Marquise Brown for Dobbs?
Yes.
Yes.
For Nakua?
Yes.
In those shallow, yeah, I think I would. Yeah.
Okay. Antonio Gibson, 93% rostered.
Not dropping him in PPR leagues. And not
0.
dropping him. 0.
Drop Gibson for Gainwell?
If that's your choice, then yes.
Right. Gibson's got to be the worst running back / player on your bench. Just know someone's going to race to get Gibson as soon as you drop him.
Christian Kirk, 0 to 10.
0.
Negative 500.
Traylon Burks, 64% rostered.
Negative 400.
Really?
0.
Okay. But you dropped
Christian Kirk is the best buy low in fantasy right now.
Would you drop Traylon Burks for Nakua?
Drop who? Burks?
Traylon Burks.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think if you need the receiver help, then yeah.
Okay.
But I don't want to. Again, someone is going to snap up Burks as soon as you drop him.
DeAndre Swift.
0.
0.
Brandon Cooks.
0.
1 in shallower, maybe like a 4 in shallower leagues, maybe even higher than that. Like the same thing as Marquise Brown.
Would you drop Cooks for Nakua?
No.
Probably not.
And Daniel Jones.
0.
1.
Okay. Would you drop Daniel Jones for Jordan Love?
No.
All right, so we'll go through the rest of the waiver wire here. And it's important to talk about the guys who are available in shallower leagues because in your other formats, your other Yahoo, ESPN, whatever, they might be available in more leagues. Russell Wilson and Derek Carr are the quarterbacks here that are available in fewer than 25% of or 35% of CBS sports leagues. And how do you feel about Wilson and Carr, Jamie? Are they must adds or well, do you like them better than Jordan Love? How do you feel about Wilson and Carr?
I think for Carr, you can buy into a lot of things that he did well. The interception was, unfortunate, but I still think you look at when he has all these guys healthy now, and Shaheed being healthy for week 1 because he was a little bit banged up in training camp, but clearly Michael Thomas, it's going to be one of the better receiving cores in the league. And so when you factor in the tight end and eventually Alvin Kamara, so you're limited. We know that he's not going to run, and you're going to need a lot of these big passing games for him. But thought this was a good first step. So would I rather have Hooer or Carr?
Love.
I'd rather have Love than Carr, but that's why I had it ranked in the preseason too.
Okay. Yeah, Wilson, he's got Washington. Whatever. He didn't do anything really super impressive. Okay, other players in deeper leagues, Mac Jones.
But he also, again, he did that without Judy. And so keep that in mind too.
He was better.
I like that he was moving. He wasn't just standing in the pocket like he was last year.
Mac Jones, Baker Mayfield, Zach Wilson, 2 QB leagues for those guys?
Yes.
Okay.
But again, first game for Mac Jones, if they can't run and this defense is not going to be as good, if he's throwing the ball 40 plus times, I don't think Bill Belichick wants him throwing 54 times. But if he's throwing the ball 40 plus times, and again, first game with new offensive coordinator, he looked good. We should mention Kendrick Bourne too. That was, deeper leagues. He's somebody you should absolutely pick up.
Agreed. Dynasty leagues, if DeMario Douglas is out there, I like him long-term as well.
Yep.
But I look at the schedule for New England. It's Miami, then the Jets, then the Cowboys, then the Saints. There's going to be a lot of passing.
Not a lot of good passing after Miami,
No.
I would suspect.
Well, we would have said the same thing about the Eagles though too.
That is true. The Patriots were without both of their starting guards. They were both inactive. So
I thought it was good. I thought Mac looked pretty good.
Yep. Aside from the
Offense
interception, he
considered.
talked about that. And the reports, the grades on the offensive line, I don't know by PFF, but I know the beat writers were very encouraged with the guards missing.
Do you
playing
care
well
what the PFF grade is?
against that team.
Sure, Dave, go for it.
I'll look it up.
We
Keep
should
going,
probably
I'll come
stop
back.
talking about
Back to you, man.
quarterbacks, but any interest in Matthew Stafford or Jimmy Garoppolo?
Not for this week.
All right. To the running backs. Let's talk about the shallow league running backs. You got Tank Bigsby, Rashawn Johnson, Tyler Algier. They're all 70 to 79% rostered. Bigsby, Johnson, Algier. Are any of them ahead of Kenneth Gainwell?
No.
Are any of them ahead of Gus Edwards? This is
Yes.
Bigsby, Rashawn Johnson, and Algier. All
Yes.
of them?
I'll bet
Roshan for sure.
Roshan and Algier for sure.
I don't know about Algier. Don't you feel like he got a lot of work because they were trying to close out the game?
I feel like he's going to be an unfortunate guy that's going to be a slight problem for Bijan's ceiling.
Oh, I hate those pain in the ass guys. I can't sign off on Algier being ahead of those players, and certainly not Roshan. Roshan's a great ad if you can stash him.
You know
The
who's
thing
been,
about Algier, though, is if something happens to Bijan, Algier is a must-start guy.
Oh yeah, that's true.
You know who's been a really good running back in his career? Gus Edwards. Every single year, 5 yards per carry.
Yep.
Every year.
That's why we like him better than Justice Hill.
18 catches in his career, so he's not going to do that. Who do we compare him to?
Compare Gus
who do you compare Gus to?
Yeah, like last year's Brian Robinson, maybe.
Yeah, somebody like that's what he does. Okay, he's a big running back who's actually got like a little bit of speed and quickness to him, given his size. He can burrow at the goal line. We didn't see that in week 1 for some reason. Justice Hill had that role. I don't know if that's going to keep up, though. I think that Gus Edwards can be decent. But again, there could be as many as 3 running backs from week to week in Baltimore's backfield. And Lamar's still going to take off and run. I don't know how many design runs that Lamar had last week, but
almost none, at least early in the game. From what
I wonder if that changes now because of Dobbins not being there. I've got your Patriots grades if you want them.
What were they?
2 of the starting offensive linemen had amazing pass blocking grades. Those were Trent Brown and David Andrews. No surprise with those guys. The other 3, Calvin Anderson, Sidney Sal, and Antonio Mafe, stunk in pass protection and run protection, run blocking. Couldn't be run protection. What the hell is that?
Don't forget about Josh Kelly, Justice Hill. I guess Melvin.
How about one more?
Yeah.
Sean Tucker of Tampa Bay, who I mentioned at times during the preseason. Rashad White had an ugly first game. I think that Sean Tucker could end up taking some work away if White continues to struggle. A good stash running back.
Okay, and Zach.
Not that Tucker was great himself, but he could be.
Jamie's got some handcuffs to stash. Ty Chandler, Sean Tucker, Keontae Ingram, Rico Dowdle. Probably got to throw Jerome Ford on there.
Did anybody say Tyjae Spears' name?
I was about to say him too. He's 51% rostered.
Right.
Played a ton, only got 4 touches.
Yeah, that's somebody who needs to be rostered too.
Was wide open for a long touchdown. Tannehill, who had the worst game ever. I bet Tannehill was the lowest graded passer in week 1.
I'll look it up, but I bet he bounces back.
He was not. Where was he? He was 27th. Bryce Young and Daniel Jones were the 2 lowest rated.
Of course, Daniel Jones.
And Joe Burrow was 3rd worst. All right. You know what? Before we get to wide receivers, I just forgot. I was going to ask about IDPs. I didn't find a single. I looked at our waiver wire. There wasn't one guy that really jumped out to me, had a big game, played a ton, that wasn't rostered. I didn't see an IDP steal out there. I was looking for linebackers who got a lot of tackles. There's a couple of Steelers linebackers that are interesting. Cole Holcomb wasn't very good. I thought he'd be the best for IDP purposes. So I don't know. Dave, you can think about IDP. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. Wide receivers. All right. The shallow league wide receivers are Tony. Well, Jamie, you have Tony, Quentin Johnston, Elijah Moore, Nico Collins, and Romeo Doubs on here.
And Jacoby Myers.
Okay. And Jacoby Myers is right at the 66% range. So Tony, Quentin Johnston, Moore, Elijah Moore, Nico Collins, Doubs, and Jacoby Myers. Your overall thoughts on that group?
A lot to like. I mean, Doubs, I clearly, playing with still whatever hamstring problem he's dealing with. That's an easy one to pick up. Myers, if he clears the concussion protocol, clearly there's a rapport there with Jimmy Garoppolo, and Josh McDaniels likes him, and so it could be a problem for Devontae Adams. And then Nico Collins, we said all along, all summer, he was going to be the lead receiver for the Texans. And I know Robert Woods had 6 catches in that game, but still Collins profiles as a much better fantasy option. So, should be picked up in the majority of leagues as well.
I knocked my camera out, and now I'm on a different camera. So
what did you do?
There we are. I knocked my
we got a view of what it's like to be one of your children.
Okay. So good options there on the waiver wire if you're in the shallower leagues or a different website. The wide receivers we like are Nakua, Zay Jones, Josh Reynolds. Dave, do you have any disagreement with Zay Jones over Josh Reynolds? Who would be your number 2 wide receiver after Nakua?
Nakua, Jacoby, and Josh Reynolds are my top 3. And then I have another receiver ahead of Zay Jones if you're just taking a passive, need a sleeper long-term approach, and that's DJ Chark. Because I don't know when Chark's going to play again. Who knows? But they need a downfield guy in that offense. Zay would be after that. I don't know how many times this year the Jaguars are going to play a lot of 12 personnel and keep Christian Kirk off the field. And I'm almost certain that that won't be the case this week. And so Zay Jones is one of those dispensable type of wide receivers where you could use them for a week, get your 10 or 12 PPR points, and then put them back on the waiver wire.
I have some Greg Dulcich news I'll get to in a moment here, but I have not.
Is it good?
No.
No.
I have not mentioned Tutu Atwell. 6 catches, 119 yards on 8 targets at Seattle compared to
he should be on the list too, but behind a lot of the receivers we've mentioned.
What about a Steelers wide receiver with Deontay out? And maybe Freiermuth too. Any interest?
You're talking about Allen Robinson and Calvin Austin. Like,
yeah, I'd rather have Zay Jones.
Not a lot of interest.
Okay. Tight ends. Dulcich is going to miss.
Again, don't forget guys like Rashid Shaheed and Kendrick Bourne. Like,
I was about to ask you about Shaheed because we didn't really talk about him.
Late, you don't have to go your first or second waiver priority, but they look good.
And actually, Shaheed finished really strong last year as a rookie. Mm-hmm. So maybe there's something to that. He's 8% rostered.
So the point of those names is you can put in dollar bids for them if you miss on Nacua and you don't want to go 17% on Puka Nacua. Put in a buck or two on, I don't know if you can get Reynolds for 2, but Reynolds, Zay, Tutu Atwell. Did we talk about Jaden Reed? Because I think Jaden Reed is going to be pretty good. He's 76% available. Shaheed, Kendrick Bourne, like these every week there's going to be wide receivers that you can get for $1 or $2. So you don't have to necessarily go crazy on Nacua unless you really need a receiver who can be pretty good rest of season.
All right, tight ends. You take a look and see if Sam Laporta and Cole Kmet are available. Do you like Laporta and Kmet better than the more widely available guys like Ferguson? Juwan Johnson's right on the border at 65%. But Jamie, do you like Laporta and Kmet better than Ferguson or Hurst?
I like Laporta better than all of them. Kmet to me is in that next group of guys.
Yeah.
Okay. Hurst with 5 catches, 41 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets. He led the Panthers in every receiving category. He gets the Saints this week, who were, I think, the best against tight ends in 2022.
They just shut down Chig Okonkwo.
Well, sort of. Tannehill also did because he missed Chig wide open. There's Musgrave, 50 yards, nearly had a touchdown in his first game. I said this.
Had it, yeah.
If Zach Ertz had caught that touchdown, he was open and Dobbs threw too high, then he ends up with 10 targets, 7 catches, a touchdown. He's probably going to be added in a lot of leagues. But the stat line just doesn't look as good. 6 catches for 21 yards on 10 targets. Gets the Giants this week. Hunter Henry was good. Logan Thomas had 8 targets. Durham Smythe had 7. Anybody a must add at tight end?
Oh, if Laporta's out there, I would say that he's a must add.
Yeah. And Ferguson, I think, of the guys that are widely available.
Are you like dropping everything to pick up Ferguson?
Dropping everything?
No. Right. Like, let's say your tight end stunk in week 1. It's one of the late tight ends.
Higbee.
Are you making Ferguson a higher priority if you're good on wide receiver, you're good on running back, you just need a tight end that's got some upside?
Yeah, I would put him in the top 10 of guys to add. I don't know if I'd put him in the top 5 of guys to add, but that's a great question, Adam, because prior to Cooper Kupp being placed on IR, I had Ferguson ranked ahead of Higbee, and then I made the switch and put Higbee ahead of Ferguson, and now I'm not loving that.
You know what I'm not loving? Waivers are going to take me an hour and a half today. It's just going to be a long one.
How many leagues are you in?
11. And the
It's
Fab
taking you too long.
Like, everybody loves Fab. Fab's great. If you play in a lot of Fab leagues, it takes a lot of time. It's like a salary cap draft. They're great. They're fun. You do a lot of them. That's their commitment. The Fab leagues take time.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Well, you know what you have to do.
It's gonna be a long day.
You know what you have to do, baby.
What?
Like the candle, and you put on the Barry White, and you just sit back in your chair, unbutton that top button.
Oh yeah,
it's waiver hub time. Just you and your waivers for an hour and a half. Oh yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of time. All right, DST streamers, Browns, Giants, Packers, and Lions for Jamie. And kickers, Jake Moody, Nick Folk, Brandon Aubrey, and Riley Patterson and Brandon McManus.
You ready for IDPs?
I'm down with IDPs.
Yeah, you know me. Here are the guys that are available in our IDP league. Jamie, grab a pencil. Jermaine Pratt. I don't know if he's still going to be out there in many leagues. Reed Blankenship in Philly is a pretty good defensive back, had 12 total tackles. Kader Kohou, 9 total tackles and a sack for Miami. Deshaun Elliott also with Miami, 13 tackles in week 1. Alohi Gilman, starting safety with 11 total tackles for the Chargers in week number 1. If you're looking for a defensive lineman, sorry.
So Josh Allen had a huge game. Josh Allen, the defender, was much, much better than the quarterback.
He was
That's
18 points in our league, but you know that had to do with Anthony Richardson playing.
Yeah, keep that in mind. I mean, with Anthony Richardson, you could get a lot of tackles.
Right.
He had 8 tackles, which is really rare for an edge rusher, basically. All right, we got to go. We'll talk to you. We got what a strange note we just got from our producer. I got to go. I need to move my car. Okay, well, I guess we're all leaving then. We'll talk to you tomorrow with some buy or sell, some buy low, sell high, and more things that have to do with buying and selling on Fantasy Football Today.